I was standing in line at the grocery store last week, just mindlessly scrolling, when I overheard this conversation. A woman was telling a friend about her terrible weed project failed, car needed repairs, she was just exhausted. And her friend kept jumping in with solutions. You should try this management app. You need to just take a me day. Have you tried that new meditation podcast? The woman with a bad week just got quieter and quieter. Finally, she just nodded and said, yeah, maybe. But what struck me was the look on her face. It wasn't relief. It was exhaustion. She wasn't being heard. She was being managed. And I realized I do that to myself all the time. The second a feeling I don't like shows up, boredom, fear, failure, my mind becomes that frantic, well-meaning friend immediately trying to fix it, optimize it, or, hustle it out the door. It's as if my own heart isn't a place to live, but a problem to be solved. What if the most radical discipline thing we can do is nothing? What if we just let it be? Okay, so let's unpack this core tension, right? Between the constant push to manage discomfort and maybe the revolutionary power of just allowing it. Our mission today is really a deep dive into this concept of holding space, what it actually means to allow difficulty to exist non-judgmentally, both for others and maybe crucially for ourselves. We're going to trace this idea from its psychoanalytic roots right through to modern thinking on things like professional exhaustion and even therapeutic models for healing trauma. We're unpacking the practical, the psychological, and the systemic sides of holding space today.
It's fascinating, isn't it? Because right from your story there, that simple act of listening without that immediate reactive impulse to solve, well, that's perhaps the hardest discipline of all.
It really feels like it sometimes.
Yeah, we're just so conditioned, aren't we, to treat pain or confusion or even just complex feelings as some kind of engineering problem that needs fixing immediately.
Right.
And holding space demands a pretty radical departure from that whole approach. So the central definition, it really introduces this shift straight away. It's the conscious act of being present with another person in their journey, but, and this is key, without judging them, trying to fix them, or trying to impact the outcome.
Okay, so no fixing, no judging.
Exactly. It requires opening up your own internal landscape, offering unconditional support, and, crucially, letting go of control over their process. It's this subtle but profound refusal to make someone else's pain about your need to fix it or make the discomfort go away.
So, the grocery store friend, she failed because her own discomfort with her friend's pain kind of took over. Her need to solve the problem overrode just sitting with her friend's experience.
Precisely. She was trying to exert control over something that wasn't hers to manage or solve in that moment. And when you look at other ways it's framed, the emphasis is always on that non-interference. Holding space is defined as being present, open, allowing, and protective of what another needs in each moment.
Protective. That's interesting.
Yeah, it means creating a kind of container, you could say, where the other person or even yourself feels protected enough to maybe drop their defenses and simply be in the pain without that frantic urge to, hustle past it.
That makes immediate sense in a one-on-one relationship. But how does this philosophy scale up, into professional settings or groups? We hear so much about psychological safety these days, especially for teams. How do those two ideas connect, or where do they differ?
Good question. There's definitely a deep and significant overlap there. Both are really rooted in non-judgment. Both rely on creating an environment where people feel secure enough to express vulnerability, maybe take risks, or just allow their genuine, sometimes messy selves to surface without feeling ridicule or penalty or social punishment.
Right, that safety to fail almost.
Exactly. Both require demonstrating genuine compassion and giving others the respect of our full, undivided attention. In a work context, psychological safety is often seen as the bedrock of innovation because it allows for that productive failure.
But if they both demand non-judgment and openness, what makes holding space uniquely powerful or different?
Well, the differences really highlight where maybe the deeper work lies. Psychological safety is typically thought of as a team characteristic. It's about the collective dynamic. Does this group environment allow its members to be vulnerable?
Okay, it's about the U.S.
Sort of, yes. Holding space, though, uniquely and fundamentally applies to the self just as much as it applies to others or a team. It's repeatedly stressed that if we cannot hold space for our own difficulties, our moments of self-criticism, our fear, our inadequacy, well, it becomes incredibly difficult, maybe impossible, to genuinely offer that capacity to others.
So you have to start with yourself.
Your inner life has to be a safe container first. You need to be able to withstand your own inner storm before you can really tolerate someone else's without reacting.
That's a really profound distinction. Psychological safety is kind of externally monitored or group-focused, while holding space starts with your internal capacity.
And there's another fascinating difference that comes up when we look at more formal leadership or, say, facilitation roles, like in open forum events. Harrison Owen, talking about open space technology, he notes that the ultimate facilitator, when truly holding space for a process, will sometimes need to do nothing and remain invisible.
Do nothing and remain invisible. Wow. In a business world that seems obsessed with visible leadership and intervention and measurable impact, doesn't that clash? How do you square that with accountability? Isn't that just abdicating responsibility?
That's the tension, isn't it?
Yeah.
And it speaks directly to removing the ego entirely.
Okay.
A facilitator or leader who's truly holding space has to step back. They have to remove their own desires, their judgments, their need for validation or credit. Accountability isn't maintained through jumping in and fixing, but through establishing and protecting the container itself.
The container, the boundaries.
Exactly. The responsibility is to ensure the rules of engagement, the boundaries of the space, are clear and held, so the participants can then self-organize and regulate their own output. The moment the leader steps in to fix the outcome, they actually shatter the container. Holding space is that quiet strength behind the scenes, trusting the process will unfold if the parameters are stable.
That idea of a safe, almost invisible container, that leads us straight into the deeper psychological foundations, doesn't it? Let's look at those mid-20th century psychoanalytic concepts, the real roots of what we're calling holding space.
Yes, to really get the power of this idea, we have to go back to the complementary work of two giants, Wilfred Bion and D.W. Winnicott. Bion gave us the kind of the mechanism of emotional processing, and Winnicott described the necessary environment for it.
Okay, Bion first then. Containment.
Right. Bion's concept is containment. Think of it as a mental process, absolutely essential for emotional development. Imagine an infant experiencing just pure, raw, undifferentiated terror, maybe overwhelming hunger or distress. They don't have the mental machinery yet to process that feeling. It's like a burning hot rock in their mind.
Okay, burning hot rock. I get that.
So the infant uses projection, basically pushes that intolerable emotion onto the primary caregiver, often the mother, or maybe later, a therapist. The caregiver then takes that burning hot rock, that raw, terrifying feeling, and using their own more regulated mental resources, they kind of digest it or process it.
So containment is like emotional translation and regulation. The caregiver doesn't just absorb the terror, they metabolize it somehow.
Precisely. They metabolize it, make sense of it, and then return it to the infant in a more tolerable, maybe symbolized and manageable form. Think warm, manageable stone instead of a burning rock.
Ah, okay.
And this allows the infant to internalize a helpful, caring object, the container itself, which gradually builds their own capacity for emotional regulation and, really importantly, for thinking about their feelings rather than just being overwhelmed or acting them out.
And what happens if the caregiver can't contain it?
Well, if the caregiver can't contain that projection, they might act out themselves, maybe reject the child or panic, which, of course, only heightens the child's original terror and confirms that the feeling is unbearable.
Okay, so Bion gives us the mental technique, the processing. Where does Winnicott come in with holding?
If Bion gives us the mental technique, Winnicott provides the necessary physical and emotional environment. Holding describes that whole, stable, reliable environment that's needed for the child to even dare to project their distress in the first place.
So it's broader than just the mental processing.
Yes, it's the physical care, the non-literal caretaking that provides consistency, reliability, reassurance, and maybe, above all, that sense of being held in mind. Winnicott thought the earliest anxieties relate to being insecurely held, the feeling the environment might just collapse or be unreliable.
Right.
A stable holding environment allows the infant to experience small, manageable failures without it being catastrophic. It fosters independence, but always with the knowledge that support is there.
And in therapy, how does holding manifest?
Well, the therapeutic work often involves recreating this holding environment, providing the patient with that consistent, reliable space where they can finally confront their deepest anxieties. They are, in a way, symbolically held in mind by the therapist, who stays thinking about them and tolerating their experience even when it's difficult.
This feels incredibly important when we think about kids who missed out on this early on. The material mentions children in care, or CIC, who often seem profoundly uncontained.
That's exactly right. Children who miss out on consistent containment and holding, they often struggle deeply with emotional regulation, with relating to others, forming healthy attachments, because they never really developed that internal container.
So their emotions just spill out.
In a way, yes. They aren't verbalized or thought about. They are spilled out, often manifesting as chaotic behavior, maybe violence or severe difficulties in school and with peers. They might constantly cycle between being completely overwhelmed by their distress and desperately trying to flee from it.
So the therapeutic goal is huge then. It involves creating a space safe enough for something called regression to dependence. Can you unpack that? It sounds intense.
It is intense, but clinically necessary in this kind of deep work. Regression to dependence means the therapist has to allow the patient to temporarily regress, almost to an infantile state of complete reliance on the therapist as the primary container.
Wow.
It's about allowing those dependency needs that were never met early on to finally surface, but this time in a safe context. This is often the only way the child can begin to integrate those split-off, painful parts of themselves, the parts that were previously just too dangerous to even acknowledge.
So the therapist provides the missing holding experience.
Exactly. Allowing that dependency, providing the holding, finally enables the child to develop the capacity to tolerate and eventually think about their own emotions autonomously.
But the therapist dealing with this, they must be experiencing intense emotions themselves.
Yeah.
That concept of countertransference must be massive here. How do they hold space for that?
Absolutely vital. Countertransference is the therapist's own emotional reaction to the client. And in this work, it's often a direct, intense, sometimes overwhelming echo of the emotions the child is projecting onto them.
Like catching the feeling.
Precisely. If the child is projecting intense, uncontrollable rage, the therapist might suddenly feel this powerful urge to angrily reject the child, or maybe the opposite, feel completely helpless and paralyzed. The key is for the therapist to recognize this intense feeling isn't just theirs. It's the child's trauma being projected onto them.
And the discipline is?
The clinical discipline is to manage that impulse, to withstand the violence, the terror, the helplessness without acting it out or rejecting the client. They have to survive that emotional onslaught so the child can internalize the crucial idea that these overwhelming feelings are survivable and that the container, the therapist, won't collapse or retaliate under pressure. That's the ultimate act of relational holding.
And this incredibly demanding work, it doesn't just stay in the therapy room, does it? The idea is that this containment process has to ripple outwards into the whole system supporting the child. This concept of layers of containment.
Yes, this recognizes that deep trauma often can't be held by one person alone. Effective containment really requires an ecosystem, layers of support. This definitely includes supervision for the therapist, so they have a space to process their countertransference. It also means supporting the parents or carers who live with the child daily. And critically, it involves managing the trauma that inevitably gets projected onto the entire professional network.
Okay, how does trauma get projected onto a whole network, like social workers, team members? And what happens if that systemic trauma isn't contained?
Well, the child's uncontained chaos can almost infect the system itself. You might see teams starting to fight intensely over resources, or professionals blaming each other for the child's lack of progress, or maybe there's chronic indecision, high staff turnover.
It sounds like chaos.
It is, and these systemic behaviors, they often aren't random. They are frequently the trauma being acted out institutionally. The professionals, often without realizing it, end up recreating the child's original, chaotic, unreliable, frightening environment.
Oh, wow.
So if the system itself can't hold itself together, can't hold the child in mind, the child can experience what's sometimes called triple deprivation: deprivation from their birth family, then deprivation in their care setting, and finally, deprivation from a stable, coherent professional network. The network itself becomes chaotic and uncontained, mirroring the child's internal state and just perpetuating the trauma cycle.
That realization that the institutions can actually replicate the child's deprivation.
Yeah.
That brings us to the data you mentioned on systemic holding. There was research on a new joint agency pathway for these children in care. How did that pathway provide structural containment?
Right. The joint agency pathway basically provided clear, mandated structural holding. It eliminated a lot of that institutional chaos. It standardized things like interagency meetings, set up clear communication protocols, and created a single dedicated entry point for assessment. Essentially, the pathway itself became the reliable institutional container.
And the results?
The results were pretty immediate and clear. The data showed a statistically significant drop in waiting times for that first crucial appointment. The mean wait time went from over 107 days, that's nearly 4 months of a child potentially remaining in an uncontained crisis, down to just 16 days with the new organized pathway.
Wow, that's a massive difference.
It is, and it clearly demonstrates that when the institutional system is held, when it's organized to contain the needs of the children, the treatment isn't just faster, it's often shorter in duration too, because the child isn't having to fight the system itself just to get help. This structural act of holding space has profound impacts on long-term outcomes.
That structural element is the perfect transition, really, because it shifts the focus from blaming an individual's internal failure, I can't cope, to looking at external systemic failures. Just like my friend at the grocery store was implicitly being told her pain was a personal management failure, we often get told our professional dissatisfaction is, well, our own fault, something we need to fix.
Yes, that relentless drive, often amplified in capitalist cultures, to fix ourselves. It aligns perfectly with the dominant theory used to explain professional exhaustion, particularly among teachers, healthcare workers, people in caring professions. And that theory is burnout.
Right, burnout. We hear that word all the time. So how does burnout theory frame our suffering?
Burnout theory basically explains dissatisfaction by claiming that the professional has finite resources, like a limited tank of energy. Therefore, their exhaustion stems from a failure in their duty of self-care.
So it's my fault.
According to this theory, yes. You didn't meditate enough, you didn't take enough me days, you didn't maintain firm enough personal boundaries, or you simply squandered your internal energy cache. The problem, under this framework, is purely one of individual resource management.
Which puts the entire burden and responsibility squarely on the individual professional.
Exactly. And that inevitably leads to immense guilt, shame, and feelings of inadequacy. You end up thinking, if I was just better at managing myself, I wouldn't be burnt out.
It really sounds like burnout theory is the voice of that frantic, well-meaning friend demanding a management app. It personalizes the problem and completely ignores the structural issues that might actually be causing the depletion in the first place.
Precisely. It often pathologizes the professional's natural human response to what might be an impossible or morally compromising situation. And that's exactly why we need to introduce the alternative theory, the one that shifts the focus from the individual self-fix to the external system, demoralization theory.
Demoralization. Okay, how is that different?
Demoralization theory argues that exhaustion, disappointment, that deep dissatisfaction, it occurs not primarily because the professional failed at self-care, but because persistent institutional and policy barriers are preventing them from accessing the moral rewards of their work.
Moral rewards.
Yeah.
It's a powerful term. So if burnout is about finite resources draining away, how do moral rewards function?
Yeah.
Are they finite too?
No, that's the key difference. Moral rewards are seen as the renewable resources derived from doing work that feels good, right? Meaningful, just. These are the very aspects that probably drew the professional to the field in the first place.
Like what? Can you give examples?
Sure. For a teacher, it might be seeing a student finally grasp a complex idea, or developing a really rich, meaningful curriculum, or making genuine connections with the community. For a healthcare worker, it might be knowing they provided genuinely good, compassionate patient care. These are the things that recharge you, that give you energy back. They're the sort of spiritual sustenance of the work.
Okay, so they're renewable if you can access them.
Exactly. But when external forces, policies, structures, mandates systematically block these actions, when the institution prevents you from doing the job you believe is morally right and purposeful, well, those renewable resources can't charge your battery.
And that leads to
deep exhaustion, grief, frustration, and often this pervasive feeling that your core moral purpose, the reason you do the work, has been violated or made impossible.
So it's not, I'm bad at my job. It's more like, the system won't let me do the good job I trained for and believe in.
Can you give some concrete examples of those structural barriers in, say, education that block moral rewards?
Absolutely. Think about the impact of a heavy standardized testing culture. An educator's moral reward often comes from facilitating deep, authentic learning, right? Inquiry, critical thinking.
Yeah.
But when structural requirements force them to spend weeks just teaching to the test or rushing through complex topics simply to cover mandated material, they are actively blocked from achieving that deeper reward. The connection with the student's curiosity gets replaced by bureaucratic compliance.
I can see that. Another example might be a shift towards rigid ability tracking. If a school moves from heterogeneous classes, where the educator believes all students deserve access to a rich, challenging curriculum, to segregating students based on perceived ability, well, for an educator deeply committed to equity, That policy directly violates a core moral commitment. That creates profound demoralization.
Or huge class sizes due to funding cuts.
Exactly. Massive funding cuts leading to exploding class sizes directly block the teacher's ability to provide individualized attention or build deep relationships, which are key moral rewards for many committed educators.
The distinction is so clear now. Burnout basically says you need a hobby and better boundaries. Demoralization says, wait, the institution itself might be actively blocking your ability to live your values and find purpose in your work.
Yes. And this brings us back beautifully to the healing power of holding space, both externally, by analyzing the system, and internally. The real healing power of demoralization theory, as someone like bell hooks might articulate it, is that theory itself can become a location for healing.
How so?
By identifying the obstacle as institutional rather than purely personal, the professional can start to tell a new, often collective story about their pain. They can resist that insidious narrative that says self-care alone will fix this deep disease. It opens the door to finding hope, maybe finding solidarity with others experiencing the same thing, and potentially engaging in collective action to change the system that's causing the moral injury.
So it allows them to hold space for the idea that their pain is actually a rational response to an irrational or unjust system.
Precisely. It validates their experience rather than pathologizing it.
Okay, so this systemic holding space where we analyze the external structures and resist just blaming ourselves.
Yeah.
That needs to be mirrored by the most crucial holding space of all, doesn't it? The one we create internally. If demoralization helps address the external system, what theory or practice helps us hold space for our own internal system, our difficult feelings, our sense of failure, our harsh self-criticism?
That internal holding space is perfectly encapsulated by the concept of self-compassion. SC. It's essentially about cultivating a healthy self-to-self relating. It's the disciplined antidote to that inner frantic friend who's always demanding optimization and fixing. It's about actively cultivating kindness toward yourself, especially during times of suffering or perceived failure.
Okay, self-compassion, let's break that down. There are 3 distinct components, right? They provide a kind of map for this internal holding.
That's right. 3 core components, integrated but distinct. First, you have self-kindness. This means maintaining a non-judgmental, understanding attitude toward your own pain, your inadequacy, your failures. So instead of attacking yourself with harsh self-criticism, I'm such an idiot for messing that up, you respond with warmth and care. You recognize that being human means being flawed and struggling sometimes.
Okay, kindness instead of criticism. What's second?
Second is common humanity. This is the vital realization that failure, pain, and inadequacy are not unique, shameful personal deficits that only you experience. They are universal experiences, core aspects of the larger human condition.
So you're not alone in feeling this way.
Exactly. It's the complete opposite of isolation, where you lose perspective and truly believe you're the only one struggling or flawed in this way. This component is really key to preventing self-kindness from tipping over into self-pity.
Right, it connects you rather than isolates you. And the third component?
The third is mindfulness. But specifically in this context, it involves observing your thoughts and feelings without becoming overly identified or engaged with them, and also without trying to immediately push them away or avoid them. It's the ability to just be with the distress as it occurs in the present moment.
Without getting hooked by the story around it.
Precisely, or immediately trying to suppress or fix the feeling.
That definition of mindfulness as the opposite of over-identification or getting lost in rumination, that sounds exactly like the functional definition of internal holding space. Being present with a difficult emotion without trying to manage or fix it.
Exactly. And what's really crucial for you, the listener, to grasp is that self-compassion isn't just some soft, nice-to-have concept. Its therapeutic efficacy is actually robustly demonstrated in research.
Really? It makes a measurable difference.
Yes. Studies consistently show that increases in client self-compassion levels over the course of therapy are associated with overall improvement in outcomes. It predicts improved symptoms related to depression, anxiety, difficulties in emotion regulation. It's recognized as a proven, evidence-based emotion regulation strategy. It literally helps the nervous system settle and feel safer.
Okay, so if it's that effective, how do therapeutic models actively help people cultivate this internal holding space? The material pointed specifically to acceptance and commitment therapy, or ACT.
Yes, ACT is a great example because it works directly on cultivating what's called psychological flexibility. This is basically the capacity to diffuse from self-critical thoughts, and to cultivate what ACT calls self as context.
Okay, defuse. Self as context.
Good.
Break that down a bit.
Sure. Think of it this way. When you're trapped in what ACT calls self as content, your identity feels completely defined by the stories, the judgments, the concepts your mind generates about you. I am broken. I am a failure. I am inadequate. You're fused with that content.
The story is me.
Right. ACT helps you realize that those thoughts, those conceptualizations, they're merely the mind's narrative. They are content, like a documentary playing on a screen. The famous analogy used is realizing that the documentary about Africa is not actually Africa itself. Your story about yourself, even if it's based on years of painful experience, is still just content. It is not the totality of you.
Okay, so that's defusing from the content. What's the shift to self as content?
Exactly. When you cultivate self as context, you start to experience yourself as the container itself. You are the perspective, the space, the clearing in which those thoughts and feelings occur. You become the observing presence, the background awareness, which is infinitely larger, more stable, and more enduring than the temporary content passing through it.
So I'm not the feeling being judged. I'm the space observing the judging.
Precisely. That is the very definition of internal holding space. You create distance, perspective, and a sense of safety around your own pain, rather than being consumed by it.
Are there specific exercises used in ACT to intentionally build this capacity, this self-kindness and self as context?
Yes, there are many. One powerful technique often used to foster self-kindness as an active value is called the child exercise. Participants are first guided, maybe through mindfulness, to connect with a specific, difficult memory of feeling inadequate or needing something important from their childhood. They imagine themselves as that small child, perhaps asking their parents or caregivers for what they psychologically needed most in that moment. Maybe unconditional approval or safety or just simple presence.
That sounds potentially difficult.
It can be, but then in the core part of the exercise, they imagine their current adult wise self meeting that younger self and actively giving the child exactly what they needed back then, offering words of kindness, maybe a comforting touch, protection.
So you're parenting your younger self, in a way.
You are. It's not just visualization. It's an active enactment of the value of self-kindness toward oneself. You are quite literally recreating that Bion Winnicott holding environment internally, consciously healing that historical deficit of containment through deliberate compassion now.
That sounds incredibly powerful, and it speaks directly to healing past wounds, maybe even trauma. Did the research back that up? Is this approach particularly effective for deeper historical pain?
It did, yes. The research confirms a really important finding. ACT interventions, which heavily feature self-compassion work, were found to be particularly helpful in reducing symptoms of depression, anxiety, and stress for individuals with a higher history of trauma.
So it works even better for those with more trauma.
It suggests that self-compassion and psychological flexibility are vital resources not just for managing everyday stress, but for actually healing deep, historical pain and the fragmentation of self that often comes with trauma. For the participants with more trauma history, the ability to build self as context and practice self-compassion led to significantly better clinical outcomes compared to control groups who didn't get the ACT intervention.
That really underscores this whole idea, doesn't it? That holding space, whether it's systemic, relational, or internal, is fundamentally about dealing with inherited difficulty, maybe inherited trauma, and creating the capacity for something genuinely new to emerge. Which brings us perfectly to our final section, connecting the psychological to the existential and even political sphere.
Exactly, which is where this concept of holding space becomes not just therapeutic, but a matter of political freedom and education, particularly when viewed through the lens of liberal arts thinkers like Hannah Arendt.
Right, let's talk about that beautiful kind of complex parable from Kafka that Arendt interpreted, the one that captures this essence of occupying the uncomfortable middle space.
Yes, Arendt uses Kafka's figure, who is just referred to as he. This he is located squarely in the present moment, but he's perpetually buffeted, pushed, and pulled by two massive opposing forces.
Okay.
On one side is the past. The past pushes forward, seeking to determine the future. It basically declares, because this happened, only this can ever happen. It demands determinism, continuity. On the other side is the future, which rushes towards him, seeking to obliterate the past entirely. It demands radical newness, a complete break, forgetting everything that came before.
So he is caught in this intense tug of war, propelled forward by the weight of the past, pushed backward by the maybe unrealistic demands of the future. And He just wants to escape that tension, right? To jump out and become a referee, declare one side the winner.
Exactly. He longs to escape the tension. But Arendt's crucial argument is that if he does leap out of that middle ground, if he resists being in that difficult tension, the two opposing forces would effectively annihilate each other, and the very possibility of genuine human action, of freedom, disappears.
So the only place possibility exists is in that uncomfortable middle.
That's the insight. And crucially, he also occupies a location. By his mere presence in that uncomfortable middle, by simply staying there, consciously he changes the entire geometry of the forces acting upon him. He doesn't stop the forces, but he changes their angle, their impact. The space he creates by staying put is the space of freedom.
Okay, so if the he represents the conscious present human being, how does this existential tension relate back to the role of, say, an educator or a leader or anyone trying to hold space?
Well, Arndt suggests the function of the true liberal arts educator, for instance, is precisely to interpose themselves into that tension. Their role is not to referee. It's to resist the urge to declare the past as inevitable destiny, and to resist presuming to know or dictate the shape of the future. They must embody the conscious presence of he.
Okay.
By staying consciously in that middle ground, the educator holds open a space. Arndt calls it a clearing for the student. This clearing allows the student to encounter the inherited world, the past, with curiosity, but not be crushed by it. It allows them to nurture what is new within themselves, the seed of their unique future, and it allows them to imagine a path forward that is not predetermined by the trauma or history they've inherited.
So the educator's presence, their act of holding that middle space, acts as a kind of counterweight to fatalism. It stops the past from completely dictating the future.
Exactly. It disrupts that conspiracy, if you like, between the deterministic past and the obliterating future, a conspiracy that threatens to eliminate the student's unique potential, their newness. It is, in a way, the ultimate act of relational holding space, remaining consciously present, non-managing, non-determining, so that the other person, the student, the client, the child, even ourselves, has the freedom and the safety to actualize into something new, something unexpected, something genuinely free.
What a synthesis. We've really traveled, haven't we, from the deep psychoanalytic necessity of a caregiver staying present with a child's unbearable hot rock emotion, to the systemic necessity of an institution resisting policies that breed demoralization by blocking moral rewards.
Right.
And finally, to this almost political imperative of the educator, or maybe just the conscious individual, resisting historical determinism by staying in that difficult present moment. The core discipline seems to be the same in every case.
It really is. It's the discipline of staying present in the uncomfortable middle, resisting the urge to fix or flee, and allowing for the possibility of something new, something emergent, to be born. And as we noted earlier, theory itself, whether it's the demoralization model or Bion's containment or Arndt's interpretation when used well, it becomes that location for healing. It helps us make sense of the world and our suffering within it, rather than just forcing us back onto blaming ourselves. The presence of that consciousness, that holding the ground in the moment of tension, it really does change the whole geometry of human possibility.
This deep dive today, it really focused on recognizing that sometimes, maybe often, the greatest act of discipline isn't rushing to manage or optimize our discomfort or someone else's. It's simply making the choice to hold space systemically, relationally, and internally, allowing ourselves and others the necessary presence to grow into something new. This presence, that moment of staying with attention, that's where the capacity for a more just, perhaps more democratic, and certainly more liberating world might actually be born.